The Caribbean's turquoise waters are now patrolled by a formidable U.S. naval fleet, encircling Venezuela's coast with a sense of urgency and purpose. Advanced warships, destroyers, littoral combat ships and Coast Guard cutters slice through the waves with precision and power, their radars scanning the horizon for any signs of movement or potential threats. Helicopters stand ready on deck, poised for action, while sailors remain on high alert, all eyes fixed on Venezuela just miles away, prepared for any scenario. This is the largest American military operation in the Caribbean in over 30 years, a dramatic show of force that echoes through the region. For Venezuelans, the sight is intimidating. For the world, it's a signal of high-stakes confrontation, a reminder of the fragile balance of power. Every ship's movement is calculated, every patrol a message, a strategic dance on the open sea. Surveillance aircraft like the P-8 Poseidon sweep the skies, gathering intelligence over land and sea, ensuring no detail goes unnoticed. This is not a subtle operation. It's a public display of American military might at Venezuela's doorstep, a clear statement of intent. The world watches as these powerful pieces move into place, the scale of the operation impossible to ignore, drawing global attention and speculation. Navy, Coast Guard, and Air Force assets are all coordinated under U.S. Southern Command, working in unison to achieve their objectives. The deployment creates a partial blockade, controlling key sea lanes to and from Venezuela, restricting access and asserting control. The stated purpose is specific, but the broader implications are clear. This is more than a patrol. It's a direct challenge to Nicolás Maduro's government, a bold geopolitical maneuver. The tension is palpable and the stakes are higher than ever as the world holds its breath, watching the unfolding drama. Officially, the U.S. says this massive naval force is there to fight drug trafficking, projecting strength across the Caribbean and beyond. The Pentagon claims drug cartels are exploiting the pandemic to smuggle more cocaine, often with help from corrupt Venezuelan officials. They argue that criminal networks are taking advantage of global chaos, making the region even more vulnerable. The mission, they insist, is about protecting Americans from illegal drugs, keeping dangerous substances off U.S. streets and saving lives. The fleet includes Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, littoral combat ships, and Coast Guard cutters, thousands of personnel, far more than needed for chasing smugglers. The scale of the deployment is unprecedented for a drug interdiction effort. U.S. officials frame this as a law and order operation, not regime change. They emphasize cooperation with international partners and stress the mission's legitimacy. Press conferences highlight recent drug seizures and intelligence pointing to Venezuela as a major narcotics hub. Officials present maps, statistics, and dramatic visuals to reinforce their case. The narrative, America as a responsible power cracking down on international crime, plays well in the media, reinforcing the image of decisive action. Yet the timing is suspicious, coming right after the U.S. indicted Maduro and top officials for narco-terrorism, raising questions about the true motives behind the operation. The operation looks like the enforcement arm of those indictments, putting pressure on Maduro's inner circle and signaling that the U.S. is watching closely. Critics question whether this is really about drugs or about tightening the noose on Venezuela's government, using the war on drugs as a convenient cover for political pressure. The warships send a message: the U.S. is ready to act, and the world is paying attention to every move. Venezuela's response was immediate and defiant. President Maduro, flanked by generals, condemned the U.S. deployment as aggression and a threat of invasion. He vowed to defend Venezuela's sovereignty, promising fierce resistance. The military was put on high alert, anti-aircraft missiles moved to the coast, and tanks paraded through Caracas. Venezuela's Navy conducted drills near the U.S. fleet, a symbolic gesture but a clear message. Propaganda campaigns declared, "Yankee go home," and painted the U.S. as the latest imperialist aggressor. Maduro called for national unity, using the crisis to distract from Venezuela's internal collapse. On the world stage, Venezuela accused the U.S. of violating international law, seeking support from Russia, China, and Cuba. The government's strategy: portray itself as the victim, hoping to rally both domestic and international sympathy. This standoff is the result of years of escalating U.S.-Venezuela tension. Relations soured under Hugo Chavez, but the crisis exploded in 2019, when the U.S. recognized Juan Guaido as interim president, rejecting Maduro's legitimacy. Washington launched a maximum pressure campaign, harsh sanctions, asset freezes, and threats to companies dealing with Maduro. The goal: cut off Maduro's revenue and force a transition to democracy. Drug trafficking accusations became central, peaking with the 2020 indictment of Maduro and top officials. The U.S. offered a $15 million reward for Maduro's arrest, turning a political dispute into a criminal pursuit. For Caracas, the warships are a military extension of regime change policy, a direct threat. For Washington, it's the next step in isolating a mafia state. Both sides see the other's moves as hostile, fueling a cycle of mistrust and escalation. The result: a dangerous standoff with no easy exit. Beneath the military drama lies a human catastrophe, unfolding quietly in the daily lives of millions. Venezuela's economy, once powered by the world's largest oil reserves and a source of national pride, has collapsed under the weight of mismanagement, corruption, and years of neglect. U.S. sanctions and a sweeping oil embargo have only deepened the crisis, cutting off the government's main source of cash and leaving the country isolated from global markets. Hyperinflation has wiped out life savings. Food, medicine, and fuel are now luxuries for many, with families waiting hours in line for basic necessities. The healthcare system is in ruins, unable to provide even basic care, and millions face daily hunger, malnutrition, and preventable disease. Over 5 million Venezuelans have fled since 2015, risking dangerous journeys and leaving behind everything they know, creating a massive regional refugee crisis. Neighboring countries struggle to absorb the influx as desperate migrants arrive with little more than hope and the clothes on their backs, seeking safety and opportunity. The U.S. insists its sanctions target only Maduro's regime, blaming socialism and authoritarianism for Venezuela's collapse and calling for political change. Critics and humanitarian groups argue that sanctions have crippled the economy further, worsening suffering for ordinary people and making recovery even harder. The debate rages on. Are sanctions a necessary tool for change or a form of collective punishment that hurts the most vulnerable? What's clear is the toll on Venezuelans: poverty, despair, and a lost generation growing up with little hope for the future. The crisis is visible everywhere: in empty shelves, broken hospitals, endless lines for basics, and the daily struggle to survive. The world watches, debates, and discusses, but for most Venezuelans, real relief remains painfully out of reach. The human cost is staggering and growing as each day brings new stories of loss, resilience, and hope amid despair. Two competing narratives define this crisis. The U.S. claims it's fighting tyranny and crime. Maduro is a dictator, Venezuela a criminal state. The naval deployment, they say, is a justified police action to protect the region. Venezuela counters, this is imperialism, an attempt to topple a sovereign government and seize oil. Drug accusations, they argue, are a pretext for intervention. Independent analysts see corruption and mismanagement in Caracas, but question the U.S. motives and timing, especially in an election year. Some say the show of force may actually strengthen Maduro, letting him rally support against a foreign enemy. The maximum pressure campaign has failed to oust Maduro, but has devastated civilians. Experts doubt the naval operation will solve the drug problem or change the regime. Instead, it's about Washington needing to look tough after Guaido's failure. The real victims: ordinary Venezuelans, caught in the crossfire of geopolitics. The crisis is as much about perception as reality. The U.S.-Venezuela standoff is shaking all of Latin America. Colombia, a key U.S. ally, supports the anti-drug mission but fears conflict and more refugees. Mexico, sticking to non-intervention, refuses to recognize Guaido and urges negotiation, clashing with Washington's approach. The risk of miscalculation is high. One wrong move could spark a wider conflict. Regional leaders in Brazil, Ecuador, and the Caribbean dread instability spilling across borders. The crisis is also a proxy fight. Russia and China back Maduro, condemning the U.S. presence as overreach. Their support adds a global dimension, turning a regional standoff into a flashpoint in a new Cold War. The stakes are no longer just local, they're global. Every move is watched by rival powers, raising the risk of escalation. The region holds its breath, hoping for restraint. Could this standoff spark a real war? Most experts say a U.S. invasion is unlikely, too costly, too risky. But the danger lies in the gray zone, hostile actions just short of open conflict. The naval deployment and sanctions are meant to pressure Maduro without firing a shot. The real risk is miscalculation, a boarding gone wrong, a skirmish at sea, and suddenly escalation. Political leaders would face immense pressure to respond even if neither side wanted war. U.S. officials stress this is about drugs, not invasion, but know a conflict could devastate the region. The Venezuelan economy would collapse further and the refugee crisis would explode. The rhetoric is hot, but the underlying strategy is caution. The greatest danger, a plan that spirals out of control. As U.S. warships patrol and Venezuela stays on alert, the future is uncertain. Is this about drugs, regime change, or election year politics? The official story doesn't add up. Will pressure force change or only entrench Maduro and deepen the crisis? The international community is divided and Venezuelans are trapped in a struggle beyond their control. The risk of accidental conflict remains high, with catastrophic consequences for the region. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the next chapter is unwritten. This story demands we look past headlines and remember the human cost. The crisis continues, its outcome still unknown.